We will call to order the special board meeting for the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Marisol Hernandez. I'm the chairwoman. Seated to my right is Commissioner William Cressy, and to my left is Commissioner Jonathan Swain. Next on the agenda is the consideration of the agenda. Are there any changes? If not, we'll proceed to the approval of the board meeting minutes for November 22nd, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next on the agenda is public comments. And we will start with Rebecca Curlin. Ms. Curlin?
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to speak at a public comment.
If you could just speak a little louder.
My name is Rebecca Curlin, and I am here today to comment on the 5% retabulation. I observed retabulation as a poll watcher with Illinois Ballot Integrity Project for every day of the retabulation beginning November 16th, 2016, concluding yesterday. Throughout the process, I observed many diverse issues which should concern any citizen. I will touch high level on only a few of these today. Before I begin, I note that the ordering of today's meeting agenda, with public commentary preceding all discussion of old and new items by the board, and following only after the reading of the last meeting's minutes, excludes the public from responding in a timely fashion to any of the business before the board today, which includes a time-sensitive issue which we closed putatively at the end of today's meeting. This means that effectively the board is delaying public comment on this business until a future date, a burden on citizens should they wish to engage in discussion of the board's discussion of the retabulation, which is scheduled for later in this meeting. I also note that approval and adoption is scheduled on the agenda as if this outcome is a given. This is inappropriate. Consideration may lead to approval and adoption. However, in a truly fact-based process, consideration may equally lead to rejection of approval and rejection of adoption. I see that that concept is not embodied in the board's agenda. At the facility on Pershing Road, as a credentialed poll watcher, I witnessed and was affected by diverse election board practices. I will now touch on a fraction of my observations. Audits are conducted with care. This care is quantitative, related to numbers, traceability, chain of evidence, chain of ownership, and the like. Care is also qualitative, respectful of the work of the materials under evaluation and their meaning, and of all who are involved in the process. At the facility on Pershing Road, I witnessed paper tapes being mishandled in diverse ways, spun off those spindles onto the floor in piles, twisted across the room, stepped upon, torn. We were barred from taking photographs of the environment. The early voting records on their rolls and their tally sheets are transported in open bins. The day of precinct materials are transported in transit cases with locks, and apparently these locks are applied. The early voting ballot rolls are not handled in any such manner, and because we were frequently barred from entering the room until after workers had begun working, we were asked to leave the room until before workers had departed the work area. I cannot say whether or not these materials were ever closed off into a locked case for overnight storage. I do not believe that they were closed off even for storage for breaks or for lunches, at which point we were asked to entirely leave the building. All I can say is that I never observed such a practice. I did observe a roll show up midway through the process and be found. I observed rolls written with 2 site numbers on them and 2 dates. Chain of custody is critical to a fact-based audit. The gaps here should be obvious. Whether they will be obvious in the official records is a question for which the answer is unsatisfactory. Throughout the proceedings, teams were taking notes, not on official paper. I asked whether these teams' notes would be archived would be retained, whether there was a retention policy. The answer was demurral, denial, refusal. At the IT table, I witnessed a worker, a supervisor, tell other workers that if they made any notes about the proceedings, they should label them draft. I had been told that draft notes were not subject to retention. This was not an audit. This does not meet the criteria. I don't know what, in fact, these proceedings were, but I can say this. The outcome is not confidence in the election results, but rather extreme lack of confidence. There is no evidence that approval and adoption are justified.
Next is Chaya Rubenstein.
Hello. On Monday, November 21st, I observed the 5% audit at the warehouse from approximately 8:40 until 3:30 p.m. along with 3 other people. 2 had left earlier and another came later. The person I brought stayed until 3:30 with me. I observed a table of 2 as per understanding. One was to read results from the tape while one recorded. First, the tapes were crumpled and ripped. This was called to Ms. Bateman's attention. She said she would take fixed tapes. I did not observe this. Additionally, I noted that instead of 1 tape reader and 1 recorder, the recorder repeatedly took the tape from the reader, checked the tape, and she scratched through the sheet as it appeared. I alerted Ms. Bateman to this. She went over and talked to the workers and asked them if they were indeed proceeding appropriately. 1 reading, 1 recording. They both answered yes, and Ms. Bateman told me they were indeed doing it. Then they continued to work in the manner I'd aforementioned. The person who was recording continued to take the tape and read from the tape and scratch on the paper recording. Even though 2 of us left at 3:30 p.m., myself and another person, many of the workers had already left. Many tables were empty. Additionally, several tables had workers sitting. It seemed there was no more work to be done. Thank you.
Mr. Olson?
Yes, I'm afraid he is late. He's
right there.
Oh, hello.
How can I fill out a form if we're late?
I filled it out for you.
Hello, everybody. So I'd like to speak just, of course, about the 5% retabulation, but just in a general sense about the attitude, I've spoken about this before, but the attitude toward the poll watchers. You know, I know you wonder who we are. Why do we keep coming back? Are we crazy? Are we mentally ill? Are we being paid by someone? Who are we working for? Well, I don't think we're crazy, and I can assure you we're not being paid by anyone, unfortunately. But I can now reveal who it is we're working for. And we're working for a crusty old gentleman, and I believe he's a military man, and he's certainly very militant about protecting democracy. And I believe he might be the only person actually named in the U.S. Constitution. And his name is General Welfare. We're working to promote the interests of the general welfare. That's why we're here. We're not trying to irritate you. We're working to make this process better and to make it more transparent. So, so this attitude toward poll watchers is a little befuddling, because if the board, as I hope you are, if you're working in the interests of the general welfare, then you should be working in tandem with us. I understand there might be some tension there because we're watching you, and we're the eyes and the ears of the public. But what I've experienced goes beyond just tension. And a couple examples of what I'm talking about. You know, we're there to witness what's going on. At the 5% retabulation, this is all public information that's on the tables. There's nothing secret there. There's nothing that would violate the secrecy of the ballot, for instance. And yet, there is a reluctance to let us see what's on the tables. The monitors who were walking around the room, to whom we could speak, often didn't have the information. You know, I'd say, could I see this? Or they're covering this up on the table. You know, I wanted to know what's the serial number of the machine they're counting, or something like that. And nobody seemed to realize that poll watchers can, as the representatives of the public, can have this information. So it would go up a chain of command, and eventually it would get to Kelly, and Kelly would have to answer the question. Yes, Don can see that. So this was a very time-consuming, very irritating process. I understand one of the rules is that the poll watchers cannot talk at all to any of the workers, which I understand fully that we shouldn't be impeding the process. But sometimes when a worker says something and I didn't catch it, you know, to say, excuse me, could you repeat that, isn't exactly impeding the process. And it was, you know, I was rebuked for talking to workers when I hadn't even talked to workers, when I was just near a table looking at something. Someone would come running over and say, you can't talk to the workers, when I wasn't. So it gets to the point where it's a little hostile. There's a hostile atmosphere toward the poll watchers. We're there to see all these materials, which are public materials, but many times when we ask to see something in particular, we were told, you can FOIA that. But if we're there in person and the documents are there, any documents on any table should be open to the public to view. I mean, this is a public election. Another rule that I found particularly egregious was that the poll watchers were not allowed to sit. Not allowed to sit. It's a 9-hour process every day. Everyone else in the room was allowed to sit, but poll watchers must stand for the whole process. And if you want to sit, there's a poll watcher table that's actually outside of the room where we can sit. This was ridiculous, silly, and again, a bit hostile. We actually had poll watchers who wanted to come, who were senior citizens, who said, I can't stand for 9 hours, so I can't come. So these kinds of rules, and I wrote a letter, as I'm sure you, to Commissioner Cressy and CC'd you two, about this rule, that this was just a little ridiculous and hostile. No one can go down there and stand for 9 hours, but we did it. So it's like we're being treated like second-class citizens rather than like the public. And it's as if we are something that's extraneous to the project of an election, when actually the public participation in the process is an integral part of the process, and we should be accommodated. And then I've said this before too, but when you're observing a process, and the observation is considered to be important, then you have to accommodate the observation. And it means, by definition, that this process is going to take longer if it's not only being done, but observed. And if you allow the observer to actually observe everything they're, by right, allowed to observe. So, I would hope that in the future this attitude toward poll watchers changes, because it's really, really tedious, you know, election after election to go through this and to see this. We need to be seen as, if not friends, then at least partners in doing this most democratic of activities. My feeling about this process, because of the attitude toward the poll watchers, that there's a sense that the process is not open, it's closed. And it's as if our elections have already been privatized. And if any activity of government should not be privatized, it's elections. So, thank you.
Dr. Jambo?
Yes, hi, thank you for letting me speak. The citizens of Chicago and across the country are awakening to the necessity for significant election integrity to protect their sacred franchise of the vote. And I've talked to you about this before. There's actually three basic elements of elections that must be protected. Our choices of candidates are being diluted by the extreme amounts of money flowing into our elections. Number two, the voters are being disenfranchised across the country by a number of schemes, from ID requirements to cross-check scams. And luckily, Chicago and Illinois actually has an open door policy for voters, and we really, really appreciate that. In fact, today, many of us were defending the automatic registration of the voters in Illinois by calling our representatives and senators. The third aspect of this that millions of Americans are waking up to is that we as citizens must protect the sanctity of the vote count. We no longer trust that our votes are being counted accurately. The vulnerabilities of the machines to external hacking and internal manipulation have been proven over and over again. And I encourage you, Don, did you give them Code Red by Jonathan Simon? Did you? Excellent. Please read that book, okay? It documents case after case of documentation of what we are talking about. So the citizens are becoming aware that they must protect the actual vote counts as well. One crucial component of protecting the vote counts and election integrity are the audits and the retabulation. This is not something just added on, some icing on a cupcake. This is crucial for us to know that our votes are in fact being accurately recorded. I would like to bring to your attention several serious flaws to the design of this last 5% retabulation that ended yesterday. Overall, this retabulation was a significant improvement in that the answers to the test were hidden from the hand counters. So we do appreciate that. But by design, there were several key elements to this that were crucial flaws. Number one, the entire process, there were thousands and thousands of discrepancies between the hand count and the machine, the produced results from the Board of Elections. Thousands. Just to give you a typical, we have them documented, but on early voting, the first hand count came in, and there were typically about 100 to 115 errors on the first hand count. They would be told to go back and count it again, correct their errors, and they would come in with their second tally sheet. And there was typically 40 to 50 discrepancies. And this is table after table. Then there was a third tally redo, and there'd be 20, anywhere from 5 to 24, discrepancies on the third tally. But never, not once, did the board or any management level question whether or not the electronic machine tally was off. That was a given. That was correct. And the hand counters were just sent back time after time after time to come up with another result. They weren't meeting the machine tally, and they were supposed to just do it again, okay? That, I think, is a crucial flaw to this design of this 5% audit. The second crucial flaw is it was very arduous, and it took a long time to do this, okay? And we just wonder why the board chose to hire the same employees that time after time in other previous elections were basically trained to do a non-diligent count because they had the answers right there. And we've told you, we presented this about audits in the past. They were non-diligent, and they would just correct their tallies to fit the answers that they had right on the page. So all of these employees were hired again to do a more diligent count. If I was managing this audit, I would not have done that. And I have nothing against these employees, okay? They may be retrainable later. But if you wanted a diligent hand count, why didn't you hire fresh employees that weren't already institutionally trained to be non-diligent? I see that as a major flaw. The third major flaw is that everybody was on a timetable, and it was very obvious from day one that this was going to take a lot longer. So we question why the employees were allowed to take breaks throughout the day, not just their scheduled breaks, their morning break, their lunch, and their afternoon. We totally agree with that. We understand. But throughout the entire day, table after table would just stop working for a certain amount of time. The monitors would move around the room and they would see this, and then they would start back up. And I'm not talking a minute or 2 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It was quite marked, and we all observed this. So if you were on a timed table, if you were on a timeline, why wouldn't you encourage the workers to really stay diligent at the task? That's the third major complaint. There were 18 tables that were not finished yesterday at the close of the audit. Thousands of discrepancies that are not going to be somehow dealt with in this audit. So what are the Chicago voters to think? Do you care that our votes are being counted correctly or not? I really want to know a couple questions, the answers to a couple questions. How is the board going to explain these thousands of discrepancies that were left open-ended at the end of the audit yesterday? On what basis are you proceeding with the proclamation of results? Because we do know that, the audit and discovery of the discrepancy, investigations of the discrepancies, has to occur before the proclamation of results. So I'd like to open that question to you. Have you written your report to the Illinois State Board yet?
If I might, and you'll notice we have made no comments as to what's going on, and that's due to the fact that due to pending litigation regarding the 5% audit, on advice of our counsel, the board cannot respond at this time. However, if you wish to submit, and this is to all the previous speakers as well, if you wish to submit questions in writing, and if a response is possible in light of the pending litigation, we will respond promptly to those questions.
We will definitely be FOIAing for the report to the Illinois State Board. So as a citizen, I'm going to represent all of Chicago, and I'm going to object to the proclamation of results today because we have thousands of discrepancies on the votes and the tallies at the retabulation that are left open-ended. And I don't feel that this was a diligent hand count of and investigation of the vote discrepancies that occurred during the 5% retabulation. So as an organization who's counting Chicago, would like to ask you to delay the proclamation until you actually investigate all of these discrepancies. Thank you.
Next is Dr. Juan Andrade, Jr. Dr. Andrade.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the board. I just came to provide a little historical perspective on the work that we've done together with the Board of Elections over the last 30, 35 years. And just to share from my vantage point the commitment that I've seen from this board, previous members, previous chairs that have been similarly committed to the idea of improving the electoral process here in Chicago for the sole purpose of making sure that everyone has a chance to vote and who is duly registered. And what brought this on back in 1979 was that we actually stumbled into a situation where, as an Hispanic, I was focusing primarily on our political behavior and as a community and trying to get a sense as to why our registration numbers were so low. And that was reflected also in the lack of representation that we had in public office. And what we found was there was a amazing number of Latinos who are being challenged on the canvassing process. And whereas if you followed it over a 4-year period and during the cycles in which they took place, it was statistically probable that the number of Latinos who were registered to vote would equal the number of Latinos who were challenged, whose registration was challenged. So our net increase after 4 years and a number of elections, we had elections in every 4 years at every level of government, mayoral and gubernatorial and presidential. Yet we almost had to start at ground zero every time. And when I brought this to the attention of the board, I sat down with the chairman and asked him simply, what can we do to fix this? And he said, well, I'm sure there's something we can do. I'm as alarmed as you are and concerned as well. And we only had a handful of sites in the city where voters on election day who felt wrongfully challenged could go and could make their case. I said, and because most of us, many of us worked during election day, we didn't have that much time to go and make a case anywhere else because we had to vote within the hour we had for lunch and things like that, or soon after work. And said, well, it seems like we could improve that. I don't see any reason why every ward should not have its own location where we could go and make our case. Secondly, the challenges seem to be a little disproportionate. And I have to wonder what the error factor might be. And he says, and so we discussed it, and what astounded me was that I don't have peripheral vision very well. I have a little bit as it is, and even worse hearing. But we would need to commission a study. And so we found a professor at the University of Chicago who would conduct a survey and take a sample to try to determine the error factor in the process. And but we didn't have the money to retain or to request a survey. And the chairman said, well, I don't have the authority to put 50 ward sites up. And said, so what does that take? And the chairman said, well, the judge has to tell me to do it. And I said, so what you're saying is we have to go to court? And he said, yes, but I need your study in order to go to court, I said, well, would you help me get the money so I can take you to court? And he's, I guess it was odd in a sense, but surprising, not at all, that he said, sure, I'll help you. If you need money to take us to court to see if the judge will agree and order me to put sites up at all 50 wards, that's what I'll do. And so we went together to a local foundation to secure the funds. He argued on my behalf. And we were awarded the funds, the study was done, and we went to court. And that's why today we have, as a result of that, collaborative effort, reflecting the board's, again, commitment to opening up the process as open in a way that would not deny anyone the right to exercise their vote. And And sure enough, that's how we got the 50 sites. That's how we got the canvassing to include the verification. I mean, you couldn't just unilaterally stand on the corner and say, well, I don't think that person lives there. You had to have, and you had to go and talk to a neighbor or someone who would know whether someone resides there, especially this individual, and get that on here on the record. So it kind of, it took an extra step, and so there were several things we were able to do, all of which resulted in this, that since that time, not only do we no longer have to start at zero like we had, Latino registration has increased 150% in the city of Chicago, where in 4 years, our net increase in the number of Latinos registered to vote was 17 after 4 years, given the cycle, given the process. And the board shared my concern as a Latino and as an official. The board, felt it was their responsibility to make this process work, and went to that extent to help us get that done. So that was the beginning of many other improvements that were made then and have since followed. Where now, we still have a lot of Latinos who are not registered to vote, but there's a lot of social reasons for that. We move very frequently, and we don't re-register, and we can't find ourselves when we're looking for ourselves during registration period, because they no longer live where we thought they did, and nobody knows where they moved to. They might have moved to Cicero or somewhere else, given how that city has grown, has exploded in Latino population growth. So that was the beginning of our partnership. And I have never found the Board of Elections not to act in the best interest of the people that it serves, the voters of this city, and have gone beyond the call of duty to accommodate people's concerns, to address them, and to try to resolve them. And they, sure enough, over the last 20, 25 years, we've seen other issues crop up, and we'll probably see more even after today. But that's the nature of it. That's why the Constitution says a more perfect union, which I've always disagreed with, because, perfection is perfection. How do you improve on perfection? But we're trying to create a near perfect union. That's what I've always argued. And I have found the board to be no less cooperative in that vision. Always working with partners in the city, with local leaders, with organizations, to build that near perfect process of conducting elections here in the city of Chicago. And we've enjoyed the participation and support of members of the board at Latino events in the city, where it's not just our coming here to air our grievances. Oftentimes you come to where we are and support those organizations that are working just like the board, to create a near perfect process that is open and fair to everyone. And having worked with the public schools to help do outreach and recruitment of judges, it's very hard to do. When they call me in to say, can you help us recruit 2,500 judges? 2,500? Well, that's what it was going to take. That's not easy. to find 25 highly reliable people who will act responsibly and take their duties responsibly and perform the way we expect on election day. It's hard to bat 1,000 in anything. And we are going to have casualties. And we do, and so I've endured, as I worked elections here in the city, have had to be, you know, on your feet and trying to, it's like a SWAT team. We're short 6 judges, we're short 4 judges. Who do we have in reserve? Who can we send in over there or over here? Who speaks this language? You know, and this kind of thing. It's a very labor-intensive and conscientious effort that it requires. And I just have to say that we have been very fortunate as Latinos in the city of Chicago to have had a board of elections that was equally committed to our own, not only our own participation, but as I said from the beginning, we were underrepresented, and that was reflected. And that at the time we held 3 elected positions, only 3. And today we hold over 30 elected positions held at all levels of government, including the judiciary in the city of Chicago. And to me, from a historical perspective, it goes down to the genesis of that partnership, of that relationship. And it wasn't to just come at you whenever, you know, but also to be there for you and to take time and commend you and welcome you in our own community and our organizations. I'm sorry, Chief.
I just have one question.
Yes.
Can you come back to every meeting and talk to us like this?
I wish I could, but my health is such that this is one of the very, very few places that I can go today, except the hospital. It's the only time I come into the city is to go see another doctor. So hopefully that'll improve and I can be a more frequent visitor. Thank you very much for your kind question. And thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. There is no further public comment. We will go to the next item on the agenda, the Executive Director's report. Mr. Goff.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We did have reports from ES&S and Dominion throughout the year, but I'd like to have a representative here from Equip for Equality, who was a partnership that we had on Election Day with monitors. Barry, would you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
As Lance Goff mentioned, we have a partnership with the Board of Elections to address the accessibility of polling places, and we wanted to give you an update on our progress with that. We were able to recruit over 220 volunteers to assist us with this project because it was a very large project, because what we wanted to do was we wanted to survey every single polling place on Election Day so that we could see how it was actually on Election Day and get a real sense of the accessibility issues. We ended up surveying 27 early voting sites and then surveying 1,370 voting sites on Election Day. That's how many were scheduled. We did have a few folks who, volunteers who called and canceled or said they wouldn't be able to get to all their polling places. We had some folks in reserve who were able to go out and capture most of those. We did have a few people who canceled at the last minute that we couldn't get to, and we're tallying those final numbers, but it looks like there were probably 15 to 30 polling places that we actually didn't get to out of the 1,370. So we got to the vast majority, obviously, and our plan is to go to those other sites in the next month or so and finalize those. We will be delivering to you the actual surveys tomorrow, and then really the next step is, which will be the next part of our partnership, is reviewing all of those surveys and identifying the barriers and then working collaboratively with the Board of Elections to identify solutions so that we can meet our goal of making the polling places 100% accessible by the next major election in March of 2018. I did want to note that we had tremendous support from the legal community. We had 7 different law firms that hosted trainings: Jones Day, Kirkland Ellis, Inshaw Culberson, Syfar Shaw, McDermott Will Emery, Neil Gerber, and Winston Strawn, and then 2 corporations that also hosted trainings, R&B Financial and United Airlines. We also had several universities that helped us out. Law schools at Northwestern, University of Chicago, DePaul, Chicago Kent, and Loyola, and then also the Institute on Disability and Human Development at the University of Illinois at Chicago. So it was a major effort, and we were able to collaborate with many different organizations in the city to really achieve this goal. We were also able to get a nice story in the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, and then the Chicago Channel 2 News also ran a story on the effort. And I think, obviously, they're pointing out some flaws and some things that need improvement, but I think they also pointed out that the Board of Elections has responded positively to the concerns of the Department of Justice and working collaboratively to address this without having to go forward with any kind of litigation. I think that's really where we want to go with this. We do have a meeting tomorrow with the Department of Justice as well as the Board of Elections to talk about sort of where we are and where we're going. So we're very excited about what the ultimate result will be, and I think we're well on our way to achieving that.
Thank you.
I would look forward to reading your report.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Until actually I have further meeting with the Equip for Equality and Justice, I'll give the board members a full report. But you see, we had bodies out there actually looking at polling places and to partner with another group, and I think it went very, very well. As you can see, they got 95% of all of it completed, which is incredible for anybody to do on election day. So I wanted to thank them. And basically, that's all I have for the board members at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, do you have a report today?
Overall, very smooth election, but we're on to the next one already. So the filing concluded yesterday for the general election for the 4th Ward, Alderman in the 4th Ward. So we have 5 candidates so far on that, in that contest, rather. So we edited all the six. I apologize. 5 on day 1. There were 4 simultaneous, and then the 5th one later that morning, and then the 6th one yesterday. I apologize. We completed editing all of the content on the website for the special general election, including document preparation, which by law we have to be able to offer vote by mail applications as early as tomorrow. So we're already into the thick of it, and we have petition checkers coming in on a regular basis.
We'll be open to 8 o'clock at night.
Okay.
So.
Anything else?
No, that's it for now.
Thank you. At this time, we'll move to old business. Oh, I'm sorry,
You're
Ms.
that's fine.
Bateman.
Good afternoon. I have nothing to report today. Thank you, but thank you.
I apologize.
That's fine.
Old business, infrastructure projects and changes in election administration. We'll be tackling that in the near future.
Yes, we will.
And electronic poll books, I think.
Good. We're meeting with ES&S at the end of this week, or early next week, just to go over November election and move on next year.
Great. Voting equipment, that's another issue we'll be tackling in the near future. And legislation, Mr. Scanlon?
Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners, it's reported in the news today that the House of Representatives, the Illinois House, failed to override the governor's veto of the automatic voter registration bill. So that bill is dead. I think as it reported to you earlier, there were 2 other bills that were introduced recently, one in the House and one in the Senate, that deal with automatic voter registration, albeit in a slightly different manner. I don't know if the General Assembly is going to get to those bills during the veto session. I rather doubt it. So it does not look like there would be any automatic voter registration in the very near future, and I suspect there'll probably be some action in the spring session of the Illinois General Assembly.
Thank you. We will go on to new business, and under new business, we have the consideration, approval, and adoption of the tabulated statement of the returns and proclamation of the results of the canvass of the election returns for the November 8th, 2016 general election held in the city of Chicago. Is there a motion to approve and adopt this tabulated statement?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next on the agenda is the legal report. Mr. Scanlon?
Well, Madam Chairwoman, the next Monday will be the deadline for filing objections to candidate nomination papers in the Fourth Ward special election. The likely date for an electoral board, if objections are filed, would be Monday, December 12th. So I would ask you if you could keep your calendars clear for a possible electoral board meeting on that date. And I would tentatively schedule it for 9 a.m. unless the commissioners have another date that's more convenient. But right now, if you could just kind of keep that date clear, I would appreciate it. I'm sorry?
Monday, December 12th?
That's true, yes, yes.
If you could do 10 a.m., that'd be helpful.
Sure.
Nothing further?
Nothing further, Madam Chairwoman.
Do we need to sign the tabulated statements? at
Yes,
this time?
yes, please, if you could pass those along. I think we perhaps have more copies than we actually need in that stack.
Okay.
If we could do 12, I think that would be sufficient.
That's 5. 6 and a half.
You got 12?
12. Let me double count, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I have 12.
Thank you.
And we will go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the financial reports. The first one is a balance sheet and voucher listing for the City of Chicago, 2016 appropriation number 16-06 dated November 29th, 2016, in the amount of $299,444.77. Is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The next one is a balance sheet and voucher listing for the County of Cook, a 2016 appropriation, number 16-07, dated November 29th, 2016, in the amount of $1,208,377.31. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is executive session. Mr. Scanlon, is there a need for executive session today?
No, Madam Chairwoman.
No? Okay, thank you. In that case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting on December 13, 2016. And if we need the electoral board meeting, we will have one on the 12th.
The 12th, and if possible, you may want to consider combining the two.
Okay, and so we will do that at the chair, at the call of the chair.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved as stated by the chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.